If you haven't watched part 1 and 2, then watch that part to be able to understand the last part. So, without making any further delay, let's get started. The real history behind Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. The myth of Oppenheimer. In the more than 50 years since Oppenheimer's death, popular culture has taken varied approaches to exploring his life. The Peabody Award-winning 1981 documentary The Day After Trinity focused on his regret over his role in building the bomb. The 1980 BBC TV miniseries, Oppenheimer, by contrast, starred a thin, quietly charismatic Sam Waterston and was more interested in the question of Oppenheimer's communist ties and his downfall. Later fictional depictions of Oppenheimer grew less interested in complex readings of his psychology and often flattened him into a character who sometimes bordered on the ridiculous. In 1989, director Roland Joffe made a big-budget bet on the story of the Manhattan Project in Fat Man and Little Boy. Despite an A-list cast, Paul Newman as Groves, John Cusack as a fictional Manhattan Project scientist, Laura Dern as that scientist's girlfriend, the film flopped. The script was simplistic, the dialogue groan-inducing, naked. Isn't that a beautiful word? Dern says to Cusack when propositioning him, and veracity and afterthought. But the film suffered most from the performance of Dwight Schultz, best known to viewers from The A-Team and Star Trek: The Next Generation, as Oppenheimer. Schultz brought a blankness to his portrayal of a man who famously had charisma to spare. Schultz is stiff and actorly, wrote The Washington Post. Like an irredeemably tone-deaf singer, he hits only false notes. In the otherwise excellent TV show, Manhattan, which ran for 2 seasons in 2014 and 2015, Daniel London played Oppenheimer as an already broken man, as though the actor's only reference for the character was the famous, "I am become death" interview. His Oppenheimer was more interested in self-preservation than the success of the project, whereas the real Oppenheimer of the Los Alamos years was a nimble ball of energy, guiding the complex endeavor toward completion thanks to his keen feeling for the challenges his fellow scientists faced. No list would be complete without one other fictional depiction of Oppenheimer. Pulitzer Prize-winning composer John Adams' 2005 opera, Dr. Atomic. If Oppenheimer objected to Kiphart's play, he surely would have found Dr. Atomic's elevation of his life into an operatic Faustian tragedy ridiculous. But the opera, which centers around the days leading up to the Trinity test and culminates in the detonation of the first atomic bomb, was rapturously received by critics and has been restaged several times since its debut. In the New York Times, science writer Dennis Overby wrote that the opera had disabused him of his preconceptions about the bomb. I long ago concluded that there was not much new to say about the atomic bomb. But I was wrong. As I was watching, I began to wonder if anything had yet been said that counted. Nolan's Oppenheimer. Before Sherwin's death in 2021, he and Bird read several scripts based on American Prometheus. One, Bird says, was boring. Another was just weird. It had dream sequences, a ghost speaking Oppenheimer's poetry. It had a scene in which Oppenheimer is at a cocktail party in Berkeley and imagines himself dropping a cyanide pill into Edward Teller's drink and watching him collapse on the floor and die in agony. Bird and Sherwin sent back a long memo detailing the script's many historical errors. So Bird was relieved when, in fall 2021, he became one of a handful of people outside the film's production to read Nolan's take on Oppenheimer. I think it's a fabulous script, Bird says. Unlike other recent depictions, it covers scenes from Oppenheimer's entire life and doesn't shy away from the moral questions of the bomb. Nolan covers in a very deft way the argument among the physicists over whether the bomb was necessary or not and has Oppenheimer after Hiroshima saying the bomb was used on a virtually already defeated enemy. Bird adds, "People who know nothing about Oppenheimer will go thinking they're going to see a movie about the father of the atomic bomb. Instead, they're going to see this mysterious figure and a deeply mysterious biographical story." Regardless of whether subject matter experts believe there is nothing new to say, the general public's understanding of Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project hasn't changed significantly since Stimson's 1947 Harper's article. After all, most people's sense of history doesn't come by way of the academy or densely researched biographies. Visiting Los Alamos myself a few years ago, I asked a docent what they thought might renew public interest in the history of the Manhattan Project. The answer? A movie. Oppenheimer himself couldn't make up his mind how he felt about making and helping to use the bomb, right to the end of his life, says Mitchell. Until now, filmmakers also couldn't seem to get a handle on his conflicting emotions and statements. In that sense, he is a valuable audience surrogate, severely divided or conflicted on these questions. Nolan's film arrives at a precarious moment in which optimism about nuclear disarmament is giving way to talk of a new nuclear age. Few world leaders today have direct experience with the horrors of nuclear bombs, and some younger people are ignorant of even basic facts about World War II. But perhaps our distance from Oppenheimer's era also presents an opportunity. Today, almost 80 years have passed since the end of World War II, says Cynthia C. Kelly, president of the Atomic Heritage Foundation. Now, she adds, the public can more openly consider different interpretations of atomic history. Why did it take so long for a director of Nolan's caliber to take on Oppenheimer's story? Perhaps it's because we're only now far enough away from those world-changing events to be open to seeing them, and him, with fresh eyes. That's no easy task. As Oppenheimer himself told an interviewer in 1948, if you've lived a life that isn't free and open with people, it's almost impossible to unsnarl it, to unravel the ball of twine.